Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions.
Good morning, Lance. Welcome to the Shoe Room.
Very nice to see you. Thank you.
Can you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
I'm Lance Bradley. I've been fortunate enough to have a career that's led me in all sorts of places, initially in the automotive world and more latterly running Gloucester Rugby.
Really exciting. As you alluded to there, you had the most incredible career. One of my favourite questions in the Shoe Room is, can you give us your career contents page? So can you take us from the beginning to where we are now in those big sections?
Yeah, sure. It's well, I did engineering at university and had intended to go into engineering, but found that I was more drawn towards sales and marketing. And so when I left, I applied for sales and marketing jobs, and I didn't really, like a lot of kids at 20, whatever, or didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I applied to companies that had products that I was interesting. So that was 3 car companies and 1 brewery.
Nice.
True. And I got a job with Ford on their graduate scheme, and that's how I started. So there was 12 of us on that intake, and we went through the Ford grad scheme. Ford is an amazing company. You don't realise how good it is until you leave, and what I learned there I still use. So that was fantastic. Did some amazing things. Travelled the world when I was in my mid-20s. It's still the best job title I've ever had. I was manager rest of the world for Ford's European product. So the biggest part of which was launching the then new Mondeo in Japan. So I was out to Japan every 3 weeks or so.
And prior to doing that, had you travelled to that part of the world before?
No.
Wow.
And I'd never really wanted to go to the Far East. It wasn't somewhere that had particularly intrigued me, and I don't know why. But this job came up, and everybody said to me, "You need to apply for this. You should go for it." And it was amazing, traveling to Japan and Taiwan and Singapore and Thailand, and I had to go to Tahiti for a couple of weeks. I know it was down New Caledonia, so it was it was really tough. And seeing those places and seeing them with local people was amazing, and just an incredible experience. So I did that for 12 years, and then I got one of the guys that I'd worked for 3 times at Ford moved to Mitsubishi and took me with him. He wanted somebody who could plan sales and do some of the stuff I'd done at Ford. So I moved across to Mitsubishi, which was based in Cirencester, and did that for was about 19 years in all. So and again, fantastic. We were the first company to launch a commercially successful plug-in vehicle when we launched the Outlander plug-in hybrid in 2014.
I remember that arriving and it being a watershed moment, changing things in terms of the industry.
It did. It changed the market, and I'd been involved. I was fortunate. I was invited by the government to help formulate what the plug-in car grant should look like and what vehicle taxation should look like around electric vehicles, which again was a really interesting thing to be involved in. And it was
just what year we talking about then?
That would have been 2010 or 11, something like that.
Was the genesis of that thinking principally a climate-based decision? Or
It was, and it was right at the end of the Labour government, and one of the questions was, is this all going to change if the Conservatives came in? But it wasn't, because it was the civil service who were pushing it, and they'd already talked to the Conservatives and said, if we do this, are you can change it all? But there was general recognition that we needed to do something to encourage greener vehicles. So it was, that was a fascinating time. Driving into Whitehall every couple of weeks or so, or getting in however we were getting in, and talking at that kind of level about what would encourage people to switch, because it's it's a risk to switch out of an internal combustion engine car into an electric car, because you're stepping into the unknown. And back then it was completely unknown because nobody had them. The year before we launched Outlander, the total market for plug-in vehicles was 900. So, and most of those were demonstrators, and they were all crazy expensive. And I remember my sales and marketing director, Toby Marshall, said to me, "You folded your arms for a year when you were negotiating with the factory." And the typical body language of nope, because they wanted me to launch at the same price that other vehicles were. And I said, "The car's too good to do that. Nobody will buy it." And so everybody else does. And I said, "Yeah, but they sold 900, and most of those they didn't sell. They just registered." So if we're going to make an impact with this car, and the car's good enough for us to do that, it's got to be priced at a level that people can afford. And we talked for a year about it. And I wanted to launch it at the same price as the diesel Outlander, and we couldn't quite get there. And I think this is the first time I've ever said this, but what we actually did is we put the price of the diesel up by £2,000 so that we could launch it as it's the same price as the diesel. And when we did that, we got all the big car magazines in, and they were astonished by the car. And I remember we had the 3 big car magazines came out to Cirencester, the head office. And so that's What Car, Autocar, and Auto Express, I think it was. And they're never in the same room together. You never get the editors of those guys. But they came out because I said, "We got something big to do." And they'd driven the car, and they said, "But how much is it going to be?" And I said, "It's going to be the same price as the diesel." And they literally sat at the table open-mouthed for a minute. And a minute's a really long time to sit open-mouthed. And they said, you're going to blow the...
You must have been so excited when you got that reaction, because you must be like, that was your line, right?
That was it. That was the point that you knew that that we were doing the right thing. And later, there were people who were running much bigger car companies than Mitsubishi was, who said, you completely blindsided us. We weren't even looking at Mitsubishi because you make big 4-wheel drives. We didn't even know you had an electric car coming. And launching it at the same price as the diesel just meant that we had to match it. We had to do the same, because otherwise everybody would say, if they can do it, why can't you do it? And it did change the market. And we ended up, I remember I was in Tokyo with the president of Mitsubishi, the Japanese president, and he said to me, "Look, I really need you to launch this car. If I let you have it at the price that you want, will you sell 10,000 of them?" And I said, "Asuka-san, the market last year was 900. We're good, but selling 10,000 into a market of 900, that's hard." And he said, "That's what I need you to do." And I said, "Well, look, I won't promise to do it, but I'll promise to try to do it, and I'll order 3,000 tomorrow." And we shook hands, and he wrote down the agreement on a paper placemat in this restaurant in Tokyo, which I'd still got. And that was the agreement. And that's what we did. And we sold 10,036.
Amazing.
So yeah, it was, and it did change the.
What I love about that story, I find myself in that position often where, so when you were negotiating about the price you were able to do, 2 things stand out for that for me. One is you knew where you needed that price point because you extrapolated ahead, maybe not to that exact conversation with the journalist, but knowing you need some conversation at that, and you thought about the impact of it. And so often when we're negotiating to buy an estate or to make a change in a landscape, I'm thinking, no, I can't do X, because if I do X, Y, Z, etc. And I think as I progressed in my career, that's the bit I noticed between the genuinely strategic directors we had. Like, I was asked yesterday, what's the difference between a really good senior manager and a director? And it's that, for me, it's the ability to genuinely think strategically. If I do X in the future, what's that going to do? And I could just see how you would have been processing that, going, no, I need this line because that's what opens this gateway and this gateway.
Yeah, and you have to do that. You have to look at who are you trying to attract with this proposition.
Yeah.
And there's when you launch a new car, there's kind of 3 groups of people that you have to attract. You have to get the journalists talking positively about it, because they are quite influential. And the reason that the UK was so important to head office in Japan is because the UK car journalists are very influential. So UK,
Is that still true today, Joe?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So UK car magazines go all over the world, and if something is if a British journalist writes that this car's good, it has credibility in other markets. So it's bigger than just the UK market. So you've got to get them, and to do that, you've got to do something that interests them. So launching an electric car at the same price as a diesel was groundbreaking. So that got the kind of reaction we wanted. And if you can get the big three car magazines saying, wow, that's brilliant, if you're one of the smaller magazines, it's really hard for you to say we think it's crap.
Yeah.
Because really all the big ones think it's good, but you think it's you're not just being contrary, are you? So you kind of you have to go along with it. So that was quite important. The second bit is you've got to get the dealers to believe that it's good. And we had a dealer conference coming up where we were going to announce the pricing, and dealers have a tough job because they're at the front line selling to customers, and whatever you talk about brand and all the rest of it, and it is important. In the end, it's a customer handing over his cash or signing a finance doc or whatever, and the dealers are the ones who do that. So price is quite important to the dealers in particular, and as well as their margins. So when we launched it, I got half a dozen of the dealers that I knew really well, and actually we're still in a WhatsApp group all these years later. And I said, I'm going to announce the PHEV pricing today. And they said, yeah, we know we are. And I said, and I need you to stand up and applaud when I do it. And they're like, mate, I'm not doing it. And I said, no, I need you to do it. And I said, and I need you to sit there, and you to sit there, and you to sit there, so that you spread around the room, because if you stand up and applaud, everybody will follow you.
It's so important, isn't it?
And they're like, you're not winding me up, are you? I said, no, seriously. If you do that, everybody will follow, and everybody will say it's brilliant because you've led it. So I announced the pricing, and fair play to them. They all stood up and applauded, and everybody in the whole room followed. 400 people stood up and applauded. So then you got the dealers on side, and by then you've already won.
And that's purely predicated on the strength of the relationship you had there
with those. I always try to have a good relationship with the whole dealer network. There were it varied, but about 120 to 150 Mitsubishi dealers at the height of its sales. And they all want to make money, obviously. And a car like this that broke the mold was a really good chance for them to make money. Because if you've got a car that people really want, they pay more for it, and simply. And so, we launched this car and we sold 10,000 in the first year. We didn't discount it for 2 years, didn't offer any discounts on it for 2 years. That's amazing. Even to fleet customers, you normally sell at 20% discount to a fleet customer, and we were having fleets come to us and say, we'd like to buy some, what's the discount? No, the deal is you can have some, but there's no discount on it. And they took it because they had drivers saying, I want one of those, because the tax advantages were so great. And that really drove the sales, and it massively changed the profitability of the Mitsubishi company that I worked for, but the dealer body as well, because they're selling cars to people that they'd never seen before. 3/4 of the cars were to people who'd never had a Mitsubishi before. And 1/4 of the people came out of BMW, Audi or Mercedes. And again, that's unheard of for those premium brand customers to go to mainstream.
When you've got something really cool.
And that was it. So it was, so that was a great moment. And that was, that kind of went on for two years of amazing sales, and then other manufacturers started to catch up and introduce other vehicles, but we still had a few more years of pretty good sales with that car. So that was kind of the big thing at Mitsubishi, and then I'd done that for 10 years and as MD, so I was kind of sales and marketing director for about 9.5 years, and then MD for 9.5 years. And then I wanted to do something else, and I wasn't quite sure what. And I always think this when I talk to youngsters, and my daughter's now 25, and we went through this. I don't know what I want to do, and I said to her, I'm 50 and I don't know what I want to do.
I steal that line from you. I use it all the time as well.
And it's true. And if you can have that, I count myself extremely lucky that I can have that flexibility. But I left Mitsubishi, and I had offers from other car companies, but they were kind of like Mitsubishi, but with different cars and different people.
And you'd done that.
And I'd done that.
Yeah.
And, I just wanted to do something different. And I was lucky enough to, Mitsubishi had been a sponsor of Gloucester Rugby for quite a long time. And so I was invited to join the board as a non-exec and then as the chief exec. And
so remind me, what year is that?
So I joined as a non-exec in 2018 and then as chief exec in 2019, 6 months before COVID.
Yep.
So, and it was great. It was very different, but also very similar. If that, it doesn't sound too crazy. So a lot of new things to learn, which is what I wanted, and working with players. People see rugby players and think, oh, they're rugby players. They're elite sportsmen. That you've never seen people work quite that hard, and the difference that small things make to them because they are elite athletes, and you look at them and you think, oh, they're just big lumps and they just push and what have you. Not a bit of it. The difference in surface that they train on can increase or decrease soft tissue injuries, and that means that players are available or are not available. And if you can reduce that a little bit, and you've got better squad availability, you're going to win more. It's as simple as
I think. So it must have been you did I don't know, I can't remember if it was to the fans or an open conversation quite early in you arriving, and you were the first person I've ever heard talk about the impact of injuries in that way on us, and you do a huge amount of statistical analysis, and you were able to pinpoint the fact that keeping certainly your best players, but fit and healthy and on the field, was so directly correlated to performance.
Absolutely.
Where did that realization come from, Lance?
Well, I mean, an elite sports organisation like Gloucester Rugby on the playing side analyses everything, and the medical guys and the S&C guys at Gloucester are, if they're not the best in the world, they're certainly up there with them. Amazing guys. And it kind of came with, we had to install an artificial pitch at Kingsholm for a number of reasons. One was that the drainage, Gloucester's on a floodplain, and drainage is really hard with a grass pitch. Even with a hybrid pitch, it's really hard. So if you get a load of rain, it all comes down the Severn off the Welsh hills, and the water table in Gloucester rises, and it doesn't drain off the pitch. So you've always going to have a problem. So an artificial pitch helped with that. We also had to build a new training centre, and there was a warehouse next door to Kingsholm that we could use, but we'd rejected it because there was no room for a pitch. And then one day, one of us, I'm going to say it's me because there's nobody here who can say it wasn't me, said, I know, if we trained on the Kingsholm pitch, then we could use that warehouse next door.
And I've been lucky enough to go there. It's incredible.
It's amazing
what you've done.
Yeah. So then we looked at an artificial pitch, and we were concerned about, Gloucester fans are very loyal and quite traditional. What would they think about an artificial pitch? But actually, it's like anything. If you explain it to your stakeholders, they get it. And if you can't explain it to your stakeholders, you shouldn't do it anyway.
Yeah.
So we installed the pitch, and it was fantastic, and it still is fantastic. It's the measurements that we did. The soft tissue injuries went down by about 50% in the first year. Now that's massive, because it just means that the number of, if you've got players out for, whatever it is, 30 days at average in a season, they're out for 15. So they don't miss 4 games, they miss 2 games. Well, that's a world of difference. That's having 2 world-class players playing in a game who wouldn't have been. That determines whether you win or not.
Well, and effectively you're increasing your salary cap by X because they're available. They're there.
It makes much better use of your salary cap because you've got the best players available more of the time. So it really was transformational.
The other thing I loved about the setup you were able to do there, you're keeping the team in the community, in the place where they're working. Very much in the marginal gains model of Dave Brailsford. Your efficiency of movement, everyone you were feeding them, training them, the medical staff, everything in that cluster just meant there was no wasted time. And the impact you were having on the player's day, you were putting more valuable time into the time available, which I just loved.
And also, Gloucester's it's not a very big city. It's about 150,000 people, but geographically, it's not a huge city, and it's very proud of itself and of its rugby club. To have the players training and playing right in the city centre where the ground is made a really big difference, not just to the fans, but actually to the players as well. Because what used to happen, they trained at Hartpury, which is a fantastic facility, but it's 5 miles out of the city centre. So the players never saw anybody from Gloucester other than on match day, which is once every 2 weeks. And then, they're in the crowd and they're all shouting, or in the car park before and trying to get autographs, and that's fine. But match days is different because players are in the zone on match day.
Yeah.
And they do go around and talk to the fans afterwards, and they're always very aware of ultimately who's paying their wages. But it's not the same as bumping into them on a training day when fans come in for a conference or for, I don't know, picking up a ticket, whatever it might be, and having some time to talk to them and realising what it meant to the fans. It's more than just whether you win on Saturday or not. It's a really big part of their lives. When COVID hit, we had a program where we tried to, how do you stay engaged with fans when there's no games going on? So we had a program where we phoned some fans, and we all had a list, and we found. And I remember speaking to a guy who said, it was a really sad story. He said, my wife died 2 years ago. So all I really have to look forward to is going to Kingsholm once every 2 weeks and standing on the shed with the same people that I always stand next to. And, we have a couple of beers and we watch the game for a couple of hours, and then I go home and I'm on my own again. And now that's gone. And you just think, wow, that's what that means to him, and it was, that's a tremendous responsibility to be running an organisation that is that important to people. It's not just, look at the league table and how we're doing. That was his contact with people. It was quite moving to.
It's a different type of connection as well. So when you were in the automotive industry and you're connecting people with vehicles that allow them to do X and Y and give them freedom and movement and things, it's a different kind of emotional connection, I guess, to a sporting club.
Yeah, it is, and it was quite. Sometimes it was really challenging. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts where you talk about some of the emails that you get, and some of them are great, and some of them are terrible.
Ways keep them coming.
Yeah. Well, but you do welcome that feedback. Every good organisation does. But when I first went, and COVID hit 6 months after I joined Gloucester, and the finances of a rugby club are challenging anyway. But then to have no games, and we didn't know if we were going to get TV income was going to carry on, and we didn't know what the sponsors were going to do. And we had programs for all of that to keep the sponsors engaged and to keep fans engaged and whatever. But there was a massive amount of uncertainty. And one of the things that you have to do in any business, if you don't know what your income's going to be, you've got to cut your costs as much as you can. So by far the biggest cost is the player wages. So we asked everybody across the organisation to take a 25% pay cut, and we were the first club to do that. And I agreed first, because you can't ask people to do stuff you're not prepared to do yourself. But of all the things that I expected to do in running a rugby club, standing in front of 50 players and saying, I need 25% of your salary, please, wasn't really one of them. But I got the senior player group in the day before, and every club has a senior player group, which will include the captain and the most influential players. And I said to them, look, I don't want to bore you with details, but let me show you some numbers. This is what our income is. This is what our costs are. At the moment, this part of the income isn't there anymore. So as it stands, we run out of money in July, and that's it. That's the end. There's no somebody might come in and they won't. That the club will close in July. If we all do this, and by the way, I already have, but if you all agree to do this, then we last until September. So that's still not great, but it gives us 3 months more than what we've currently got. And 3 months might be a long time, and it might be what we need. And I still remember it was actually Ed Slater said, "This is my club. Tell me what I need to do." And that's what what a great bunch of guys they were. Yeah, and Ed was a fantastic leader. And they actually went and spoke to the other players. So by the time I spoke to all 50, the senior group had already said, "You got to do this."
It's incredible.
It was amazing.
So you mentioned a phrase that's really important to me that I'd like to dive into a little bit, and that's high performance. So lots of people in business sort of point towards sport and the sort of high performance culture that's talked about, but in a very aspirational way from a distance. They haven't lived it and understood it. You have. What does high performance in a culture really mean, and what does it look like?
I mean, that's a really interesting question, and running a rugby club was really interesting because you've kind of got two halves to it. You've got the elite sport bit where everybody knows that it's a high performance environment and everything is measured. Everybody has their own objectives, and it's different depending on who they are, what position they play, how far through their careers they are, and all of those kind of things. And they're coached every day and measured every day and given team coaching, but also individual coaching to maximize their performance. Or has to be the same on the commercial side. All of that needs to apply to the commercial side as well, because that has to perform at the same high level. And in some ways it's easier in a sports environment because you've got such an obvious comparison. You can say to people, "Look, well, this is what we do with these guys, so why wouldn't we do it with you guys?" The good news is you're not going to have to run around the pitch in the snow, but you are going to be measured and coached and encouraged to do your own personal bests. So it's quite it's quite handy in some respect, because you kind of have to do that in any organisation. But in a sports organisation, you've got those fairly obvious parallels. And one of the things that we tried really hard to do with Gloucester was to make it one club. We talked earlier about the training centre being brought into the city, and that helped enormously in making it one club. And one of the things I said to staff was, when we win something, the TV is going to want to interview the captain or the guy who scored the try or whatever. He's not going to interview me, and he's not going to interview any of you commercial guys. But you will have played as big a part in it as the captain or the try scorer, because if the place isn't clean, they're all going to get sick, and then he isn't going to score a try because he's going to be off sick that day. So you cleaners, you have a big role in it. You finance guys have a big role in it, because if the money's not managed properly, we can't afford the guy who's going to and you just kind of bring people in, and it was like, I quoted the famous story about JFK going to NASA in 1960 or 61 or whatever it was, and he talks to the cleaner and says, "Excuse me, well, what do you do?" And he says, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." That level of buy-in, that's a wonderful thing, and that's a wonderful feeling to get the cleaner guy knowing that he's helping put a man on the moon. And so you have to get that kind of high performance mindset. If it was just, "I'm getting the floor clean," that's not a very big goal. Putting a man on the moon, that's you've got to do well to do that.
The way that presents in our world is, so we're fortunate to manage an incredible portfolio of estates across the country. And the majority of those estates have an estate manager who is working a long way away from everybody else with their own small team, but isolated from the rest of the group. And in each of the previous chapters of my career, I've always seen a tension between the sort of central office-based commercial side of the business and the operation delivery side. And not here. We're fortunate not to have it here. We still need to work on it and get that same culture you describe. But I've always seen tensions between the commercial side and the operations side, in that the operations side are the ones who do the real work, whether it's engineering, digging holes, the equivalent of your front row, right? They're doing the heavy lifting and the pushing and the running around in the snow. So we see that in business as well, trying to blend those two cultures.
Yeah.
How do you, so you said bring it in, how are you literally doing that? How are you ensuring that one club integration?
The physical side of it was important. So all being on the same site was important. But one of the other things that I really wanted, and it was kind of something that we did in Mitsubishi, when we did a press launch for a new car, I made sure all the staff drove it first, because the press are important, but not as important as your own employees. And sometimes that meant that the press launch was slightly later than it could have been, because you always time it so that when the cars come into the country and then you go out. But I didn't ever want somebody to, one of the people I've worked, one of my colleagues, to go down the pub on a Friday night and somebody say to them, "Oh, I read that report on that new car, that new Mitsubishi, what's it like?" And for them to have to say, "I don't know, I haven't driven it." But I wanted them to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I drove it a couple of weeks ago. It was great," or "I didn't like it." It doesn't matter, but I wanted them to have an opinion on it. And it's kind of the same at a rugby club. I didn't want people to go down the pub and somebody to say, "Oh, you're at Gloucester, what's Lewis Rees Zammit like?" And for them to say, "Oh, I don't know, I've never met him." Yeah. So one of the things that we did is we introduced twice a week, we all had lunch together. And you have to tailor that around the players' training program, because that's the most important thing, the players and their training. But you can have lunch with them, and it's actually quite a nice thing to do. And the players like it too. I remember, I won't say who it was, but one of the players saying to me, "I'd really like to wander through the commercial department and just talk to people, but I don't want them to think that I'm Mr. Billy Big."
Yeah.
So I feel awkward, and I don't always have an excuse to do it, but I would like to talk to them. Well, that's great. Not everybody does, but that's okay. You don't have a 3-line whip out. You've all got to talk to each other. But just creating an environment where they can makes a big difference, and people then bump into each other and talk, and they get to know each other. And the youngsters who are coming through the academy, who are, we look at them as rugby players making their debut, that they're 18-year-old kids finding their way in the world, and they happen to be big and strong, but they're still 18-year-old kids, and so it helps give them the confidence of everybody's here for you, and just make it a welcoming environment. And that's the key thing, to make it an environment that everybody's comfortable in.
You mentioned about the measurables and objective side of things. So for people who haven't had the opportunity to work in your world, in business, you might get your 3 objectives for the year and responsibility and activity. Is it literally the same as that in terms of a rugby professional? They will get 3 objectives for a set time period they have to hit, and specific measurables outside of just winning.
Yeah, and look, I wasn't closely involved in setting the KPIs for the players.
That was with the head coach.
That was with the coaches, with the strength and conditioning guys, sometimes with the medical guys if that was necessary. But they would measure everything. There was a famous game where Gloucester beat Bath 64-0, and an amazing game. And one of the most amazing tries was scored by Jamal Ford Robinson, who's a prop. And I think Jamal's story is that he ran in from the halfway line. Everybody else's story is that he ran in from the 10-metre line. But it was a very spectacular try because of but the important thing is it was actually his personal best sprint over that time all season. So even in a game where it was a proper party atmosphere, that game, as you can imagine, and Jamal had scored a try, and props don't score a lot of tries. They sometimes score tries from pushing over, but not often running in. So it was quite a big thing. But even within that, they were measuring everything, and Jamal knew that it was his personal best over that time for it because it's important to him.
It's amazing. So I'd like to move from high performance to talent and talent identification. So you talked about some of the young players coming through the academy and things. How do you go about scouting for that talent and finding the next great people and players?
Yeah, and on the playing side or on the commercial side?
Well, let's do both, yeah.
Okay, so the playing side, generally, and there's a lot of talk about elitism in rugby and how a lot of the people who play rugby come through public schools. And we had a look at that because we wanted to be very inclusive at Gloucester.
Because of moral, or because you thought it was a way of finding talent that was untapped?
Yeah, both. Because it felt like the right thing to do. And because you don't want to miss anybody. But what actually happens is that and certainly in Gloucestershire, there's half a dozen public schools, and they talent spot themselves. So when people say, "Oh, it's kids who've come through public schools," it's not necessarily because how did they get there?
Oh, yeah,
so it's not necessarily that their parents were wealthy, and so it's only wealthy kids that do it. It's that the schools scout because they want to win their rugby matches. So they kind of have their own network of scouts. So it's actually a much more efficient way for an elite club.
That's such an important point that's not mentioned. So we were having the same conversation in our context yesterday. So because we're one of probably the first natural capital asset management company, certainly in the country, if not the world, we are oversubscribed for talent. So for our internship, where we're looking to take 4 people, we had 455 applicants.
Yeah,
so we are getting to take the 1%. So we haven't got 9 or 10 other oxygen conservations competing for that talent base at the moment. So we were having that same conversation. Should we be trying actively to find people not from the universities that are coming through? But we hadn't had the realization that the private schools, I think predominantly we aren't from private schools as a company, but the private schools, the universities, they're funneling their own talent through. And it's, where did that come from? It's such a great point.
Yeah. And actually, I went to a public school, but my parents didn't pay for it. I got a free place because I was talent spotted. So it's the same kind of thing. It's been going on for a long time. So that's it. But the responsibility of a rugby club on the playing side isn't just to get talent who's going to be in your first team, because there's value in promoting rugby values and getting people to play the game. So, but when I left Gloucester, we were in the stages of building a program with much closer links to the local rugby clubs, because they're all kind of struggling to get people to play. And as the elite club in the area, we can do things that a local club can't do. So if we say we're doing a day where we'll send our coaches to this, and it's an open day, and you can come down and show how good you are, you'll get hundreds of youngsters turning up. And the vast majority of them won't be good enough to ever play in the Premiership, but they'll be good enough to play for a local team and enjoy it.
Or building that base for the sport.
And then you build a base for the sport, you build those kind of respect values in the city. If, there's youngsters who've got a bit too much aggression, there was a knife crime problem in Gloucester, and that's partly borne by frustration and not knowing what to do. Rugby can take that energy out and teach that discipline and give an avenue for physical exercise that's much more wholesome than
in a less obvious way as you're able to do. We're trying to positively impact the environmental sector. So traditionally, the environmental space has been the purview of the retiree. The National Trust go plant a tree on a Sunday. It wasn't sexy, exciting, or aspirational for young people. Fortunately, that's changing. But the experience of when I certainly tried to get into the sector from uni, it's largely dull and unpleasant and desk-based, and the things you want to join the environment sector for are kept away from you. So our internship program, of those 455, we're bringing a cluster here to Monaco for a whole assessment day. It's really a training day. So yes, we are assessing to pick the four we'll take forward, but we want to give the rest of them the experience of how we look at the environment, how we talk about it, so that as they do go on to their careers, we're trying to grow the base of the industry in the same way that you're trying to grow and increase the sport.
And to encourage them and to show, to show them that there's an exciting career to be had. And it might not be here, but it can still be somewhere. It's a great thing to do.
Totally. So sorry, back to finding that.
Yeah. So you kind of do that, and we invested a lot in the academy at Gloucester because it's partly because of the pressures on salary cap and finance.
And does the academy financing sit outside of the scope of the salary cap?
Yeah.
And is that true of you mentioned about the amazing medical staff and S&C staff?
That's also outside. So the salary cap only applies to your first team players.
So the two areas you've invested there, to me, outside of the sport, would seem like massive value for money investments to make your salary cap go further.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
You've still got to have the budget. There were always two constraints of what you could spend. One was the salary cap, and the other one was how much money you've got.
Yeah.
But investing in the academy just felt like a good thing to do, and I think it was. And we went. I wanted to make a statement about our academy, so we hired Carl Hogg, former Scotland international, and former head coach at Worcester and a number of other clubs, to run it. And it was quite unusual because there was still a little bit of, well, that's the academy. Coaching, you haven't done very well, so go and work in the academy. And I really wanted to change that because actually you want your best people in the academy.
It's a surprise, that, isn't it? Because, the maybe not saying the Messiah, the Barcelona training ground is heralded as like the hot there, bringing talent through.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a lot more money in Barcelona FC than there is in most rugby clubs.
Yeah, no.
It's there's loads of things that we would have loved to have done, but so you've got to watch every penny. But I felt and still do feel that it was a really good investment, because the trouble with so much sport and where I felt my automotive background helped. In automotive you have to plan long term. I mentioned earlier that I folded my arms for a year until we got the prices we wanted on those PHEVs. I could have given in and had the car on sale a year earlier than that, but it wouldn't have sold. So it was better to have that long-term plan. A product cycle's typically kind of 5 years. So that's, you're always planning. When you launch a car, you're not planning how you launch it. You're planning the whole life of that car. So it's launched, the sales start to pick up, they plateau. The objective is to get that plateau as high as possible and to extend it for as long as possible. And you do that by adding spec or reducing the price or whatever it might be, improving the engine, whatever. And then it starts to tail off. And as it starts to tail off, that's when you have to launch the next one. So you're always planning quite long term. And one of the things I found in a sports club is that wasn't really the way that things went.
It's interesting.
And you kind of see it more in football. You get, there were 2 managers sacked this week because they'd lost a few games. And I get that, but they weren't idiots. They hadn't become idiots. A bit of faith long term, in my view, is what was needed. So that's what I tried to do at Gloucester. And investing in the academy, it is a long-term thing. There's the famous saying about planting trees that you'll never sit in the shade of. You have to look like that. I was listening to one of your other podcasts talking about politicians and they need to be brave enough to do things not to get re-elected, but that are the right things, and that's so true. But it's the same in business or running any organization. You can't do things that just reflect well on you, because so in my I'm lucky. I don't feel I've really got anything to prove. So I can afford to do what I think is the right thing, whether or not people are going to look at it. If it's a sports club, fans are going to look at it and understand it. And you should explain it to them, and usually they will understand if you explain it to them. But investing in an academy, everyone goes, oh yeah, of course you do. But why didn't we win this week? Right, well, because we invested in the academy and we're playing boys, and soon girls too, when the women's academy comes through, who are not necessarily really ready, but that's how you develop them. So that in 3 years' time, you do have a winning team and you do have youngsters who are experienced.
You're creating that life cycle of the vehicle, but in the playing squad as well, right? So you're looking at, well, in 3 years, hopefully this person's coming,
And
this one,
and that's how you try and plan it. And you know, Hoggy always talked about his conveyor belt of your career. So you come through and you grow, and then you're a regular, and then just like a vehicle life cycle, you know, as you get older, you know, there's some young whippersnapper coming through, and you need a bit more rest weeks than you did when you were 25 or whatever. And that young whippersnapper actually does quite well. And even though you're fit next time, they retain their place. And that, you know, that's the natural way of things. But in my mind, that's how you have to plan. And you have to have confidence that you're right. You know, that the chopping and changing of coaches, to me, was a really bad thing, because it doesn't work.
Nope. And that's been proven. You know, you look at the sort of books that are now out there about the statistical analysis of changes. There's way more of it published that I've seen on the football side of things. But whenever that manager's changed, it's not positive.
You might get a blip, but that's all.
Yeah,
it's, you know, it's you know, if you look at Gloucester's win stats over the last 10 years, you know, George Skivington's is exactly the same. So it's not getting better yet, but it's not getting worse. And if you stick with it, it will get better. You know, we've both been in leadership positions for a while. You know, are you better now than you were when you first started? Of course you are. You know, I've made so many mistakes, as everybody does.
Yeah.
But the task is to not keep making them. You know, to learn from them and move on. And you can only it's literally impossible to do that without experience.
Correct.
So we did try and plan long term, and recognize that sometimes there'd be painful bits. And you know, if you'd got some amazing world class coaching, maybe he wouldn't have done it, because he'd already been through that. But there wasn't. That isn't what we decided to do. We decided to go with an exciting young talent, and you've got to stick with that. And
so if we go from the on the field to the commercial side, how do you find talent on the commercial side of the business?
That's. I mean, at a rugby club, it was slightly different to the car market. You know, Mitsubishi had about 200 employees. On the commercial side of Gloucester, it was kind of 40 or 50. So it was much smaller, and therefore you don't. You know, at Mitsubishi we had a graduate program, so we continually had those people coming in, and that was. I loved that program. I loved having the graduates in, because you see them and they're desperate to impress, and they're desperate to get promoted the quickest. And part of my job, and the bit that I really enjoyed most, was trying to coach those youngsters, and to let them know it doesn't matter whether you get promoted first or not. And they never listen, of course, same as I didn't listen.
I didn't listen.
No. But to just say, what you need to look at is where are you going to, in 5 years' time, you won't remember whether you got promoted before John did, and it won't matter. You know, there's the famous line from a song, you know, the race is long, and in the end, it's only with yourself. And that's such an important line.
We have it at the moment. We've got two. Something. We kept 4 interns from our last intake, and incredibly talented people, and they'll be listening to this. So, one of them is, where are they going tomorrow, and I need to be there now. The other is just like, knows they're collecting every skill set they can now, because they're thinking 10, 20 years ahead. So they literally said to me yesterday, look, if you want me to go move sheep or clean out this, or whatever you like, whatever you want. Whereas the other one is like, no, I need to be doing this specific thing now. Yeah. And it's so interesting. You can age and experience and sit back and go, just collect everything. And every day I think presented to me. So I go back to different points in my career. I'm like, oh, I learned that thing I'm using today then. And you have no idea you're learning it at the time. But you've got a skill or an experience that suddenly presents itself 20 years later that you need. So it's just collecting the range of those.
And it is. It's so important to do that, because when Ford, where I started my career, had a brilliant graduate program. I had 14 different jobs in 12 years there, and you could say
16 in 9 years at the EA.
Yeah,
Variety, right?
That's because you're loads better than me. I just didn't keep a job long enough. But and then people say that, like, "Oh God, did you get promoted to get rid of you?" But it wasn't. It was part of the program to just maximise the experience that you got, and it really was so valuable. As you get further through your career, you do need to stay longer, because you need to. You're not in the experience gathering. You're always gathering experience, but you have to. You have to give more back as you get older and you have people working for you. But it was incredibly valuable to have all those experiences, and there's still things that I learned at Ford that I still absolutely use every day in my working life. It's and you'll never know what they're going to be.
You've got to work with some of the most incredibly talented rugby players. Can you give me a short list? Who comes to mind when I talk to you about the most talented players you've had the opportunity to work with?
Yeah, I have been very fortunate, and it's really interesting being up close to seeing the players, because you look at them on the pitch and they all kind of look like normal people, because they're all the same kind of size, doing the same kind of things, and when you get to meet them, they're not normal people. Some of them are 6'8", and the small ones are only 16 stone, and it's an amazing thing. You see them out for the game and they look like they've been in a tumble dryer, because they're red and bruised and cut, and so they're all, to get to play elite rugby or get anywhere near it, they're all astonishingly talented, and so that was amazing. I remember the first time I watched a so-called non-contact training session. It would kill people like you and me. It literally just knock you out, and yet they're going through it, and that's non-contact. So they're all amazing people. But the people that you see, and people have different talents. But when I joined Gloucester, we just signed Danny Cipriani, and he was an astonishingly talented player. He could do things with the ball that physics wouldn't let you do. And I remember saying to him after he'd done something in one game, and he was a master at looking one way and passing the ball somewhere else. And I think he'd kicked the ball through, and it had gone at almost 90 degrees directly into the hands of the winger who'd gone on to score. And I said to him afterwards, did you mean to do that? And he just smiled and said, "What do you think?" And I don't know if he knew, and I still don't know what the answer is to that. But there was enough that he did that you just are left thinking, "Whoa, there's almost nobody else who can do that." And it has a big, huge influence on the team, because the opposition have to put 2 or 3 players on him, because he doesn't know what he's going to do. So the opposition certainly don't, and it just opens up. It's not necessarily that he scores all the tries; it's that he creates the space for everybody else to do their thing. So that was amazing.
And when someone is that talented, because we are talking about the best of the best of the best. Do you have to manage them and treat them differently, or should you always treat everybody the same on a team?
It would be lovely to treat everybody the same, and you need to be fair to everybody.
Yeah.
But that kind of prodigious talent brings its own challenges with it. Danny's a very complicated person, and that required a bit of extra management. But mostly positive. But it's
and as a leader, I'm assuming you're consciously aware of, okay, yes, I have to create the environment for this superstar to be brilliant. How do you judge when the impact on others is a lot, too much? Where's the balance on that?
That's the part of the head coach's role. So the chief exec wouldn't get involved in that kind of analysis of players. I tried to make sure that I knew all the players, because we were all part of one team. But I wouldn't have been involved in how should this one be managed? How should that one be managed? But the head coach will be looking at it, and it's like everything. You balance what you get with what it costs in terms of resource or finances or whatever else it might be, and make the decision on what's best for the team.
Interesting. So let's go from Danny to who else jumps to mind?
Yeah, I mean, one of the outstanding leaders that we had at the club was Ed Slater, who very sadly was diagnosed with motor neuron disease 12, just over 12, 15 months ago now. Ed was such a great leader on and off the pitch, actually, and he was, he was remarkable when he was a player. I remember watching him play. He played second row, and the way that he led the pack and just gave people confidence in what they were doing. Look, we're doing the right thing. Keep doing this, and we will score. And you could kind of watch it in games, whereas previously they might have not panicked, but gone for a quicker option. But Ed had that kind of level-headedness to say no, this is what.
And was he particularly vocal about that, or was it purely a role modelling part?
He was vocal. Is it okay to swear on?
Yeah.
During COVID, we were away at Northampton, and Northampton's always a difficult place to go. It's a very well-run club, and they've always got a decent team. And we just had one of those days. We were, I think, 20-something nil up with 10 minutes to go, and by the time you get to not very long to go, and you're definitely going to win, and you're winning to nil, the big thing is you want to win to nil.
Yeah,
when we beat Bath 64-0, the last 10 minutes, everybody's really nervous. With 50-something points up, everybody's really nervous because we don't want them to score. It doesn't really matter, except that you don't want them to score. And anyway, Northampton broke through, and this is during COVID, so the ground's empty, so there's no crowd noise, and it broke through, and one of their players broke through and scored, and all you could hear was Ed going, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" And we're winning by like 30 points, and we hadn't won there for ages, and it was a great result, it'd been a great performance, but he was so, his standards were so high that was
one of my sayings, though, and there's some of the team in the room and they're going to roll their eyes at this. One of my sayings is, how you do anything is how you do everything. So last night I reviewed a paper, so we're just about to complete another acquisition, and when we buy a new estate, we lay out our 12-month plan, lots of analysis of it. These things are beautiful now, so we've crafted it to a state where that's going to be a 70-page proposal paper. Every other page is a beautiful, stunning image that Josh has taken, and there was a formatting error in one table on page 64. And I wrote, we need to change this. Brackets, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I just know as soon as they see that. And it was amazing. It's an amazing paper. No. I'll be right. If when we see it again in 12 months, I'll know where that is.
Yeah. Like one of the first lessons I learned when I was at Ford and I was doing sales planning and analysis, and everything was done on paper in those days. And Ian McAllister was the MD and chairman, and he was going to a meeting in Europe and needed a load of stats, and it was about a centimetre thick, this pack of stats. And so I got all of the guys, I had 11 guys working for me, and we produced this pack of stats. And there was a number in it that I wasn't quite sure about, but it was in a pack of stats, it'd be all right. And Ian got the pack and went, where did that number come from? And I've never done it again.
No,
and now I can do that to people and I know how to do it. It's really annoying. And it will be annoying until you do it to somebody else.
Yeah,
but I learned that same lesson.
Amazing. So one of the most exciting players I've seen you work with is Lewis. So Lewis Resell it. How early was his involvement with the club? Did he come? Was he part of the academy?
Yeah, he was part of the academy, and he came in through Hartbury University. So
how early did you know you had something there?
Well, quite early. He got his chance whilst he was still in the academy, and it was. I think it was the season I started. It might have been. It was around that time.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And we had a couple of injuries in wingers, and when you have youngsters, if you can't really bring youngsters in the pack because their bodies are not developed enough, and it's very physical. I mean, it's all physical, but in the backs it's a bit easier because if you've got a 17-year-old kid who's quick, it doesn't matter how big the other guy is, because if you can't catch him, it doesn't matter. So Zam came in from injury, and the first season that he played on an academy contract, and I won't tell you how much it was, but it wasn't very much, and just took the world by storm. And that's that he'd been identified not by me but by the talent scouts young, but that was the season that he broke through, and we really felt, wow, this is somebody special. And I've still got a picture of him signing his first professional contract in my office, because we needed to get him signed up, because when he was playing like that, he was going to attract a lot of attention.
It must be such an interesting balance from a business perspective. So you're watching the game, you're so excited about seeing the talent come through, but you've got to be thinking, however good this performance gets, that's getting more expensive on that first contract.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely. And most players have agents. So, as soon as they have a good game for the first team, the agent's on the phone saying he's going to want a bigger contract. And, I'm sure it is.
Calls go. So when they ring up and say, Lance, they're going to need a...
No, they didn't usually call me.
Right.
So it was fairly rare for me to speak to an agent. But it's, you just have to... You have to build a relationship with them, and most contracts are 2 years or 3 years, so it would be quite unusual to rewrite a contract during that period. But players can sign a new contract with another club in the last 12 months of their current contract. So when you get to that point, you need to have decided.
And is there any restriction? And so, are you openly able to speak to those players in the last 12 months? That's totally fine.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But that's part of the squad planning. I mentioned the sheet earlier where you've got your kind of your first, second, third choice, and how much you want to spend in each position, and how you do that. So and you do that for each subsequent year. So if a player's getting to a point where that the agent's going to ask for a sum that you're not prepared to pay, then that's fine. But you plan around it. If you think that it's going to be in the region of what you are prepared to pay, then that's how you plan for it. So the key thing, we've been talking about long-term planning, but that's the key to it, is making sure that you don't ever want to be surprised by you kind of know what a player's going to ask for, and therefore whether you're prepared to pay that or not.
Have you ever had it where the player hasn't asked for enough, and you feel as if they've undersold themselves?
Not really, because you wouldn't really do that, because players kind of know what everybody else earns, and they kind of know which positions get paid what, and they know that if they're first choice in an England international, they're going to earn that much, and if they're second choice, they're going to earn that much. So you try not to do that, but that's not to say that sometimes players could earn more by going to another club.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I always tried to do at Mitsubishi was to say to everybody, it can't just be about the money. If you're only interested in the money, don't come here, don't stay here, because you will be able to earn more somewhere else. But your overall enjoyment and well-being and value and respect and having fun, because you spend a lot of time at work. It can't all be fun, but some of it's got to be fun. And the money that you get, that overall will be better than everybody else. But if it's just money, don't talk to us. And it's kind of the same at a rugby club. If it's just money, they're probably not the player you want.
Our amazing finance director, Ellie Adams, who's done a podcast, give it a listen, folks. She talks about a triangle for people. She talks about meaningful work and enjoyment, the pay and overall benefits package, and the potential for learning and development.
Yeah.
She said throughout her career, and she's worked in some of the biggest businesses and did acquisitions and mergers for PwC before working for Auction House and then us. Said as long as you've got two and the other's okay, you're fine.
Yeah.
As soon as it's only about one of those things, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, and that's a great way of looking at it. And I've had conversations with players that I've known particularly well who've been offered however much more to go to another club, and says, look, you can, because we cannot get to that.
It's about that. Go.
But, look at what we're building here.
Yeah.
And, I don't think that when you're in your rocking chair in, however many years' time, you'll look back and say, yeah, but I earned this much extra by going to that club. I think you'll say, I won this.
Yeah.
And, so it's always a balance.
Nice. So we've talked about talent side of things. Who stands out from a pure work ethic perspective? Who are those players that just outworked everyone else in the league?
Billy Twelvetrees.
That was quick, straight.
Yeah. Just the most astonishing athlete and person. He's had an incredible career, and
He seems to be going on forever.
oh yeah,
The longevity.
He's so fit. When they did the cycle ride for Ed after he was diagnosed with MND, they did a 350-mile cycle ride, and which is amazing in itself. And when they got back, they finished at Kingsholm, and everybody was absolutely knackered, just out on the floor, apart from Billy, who got all the kids that were there and got them running around the pitch, throwing balls around. Like, mate, you've just cycled 350 miles. Like,
So how is that built? Is that purposeful choices about nutrition
and being relentless? I remember talking to him during close season one time, and I said, "Oh, it must be nice to have a break." And he said, "No, I hate it. I can't wait to get back."
And so I'm genuinely worried about Christmas and New Year, right? To the point whereby the team are on a rota of who I get to work with, because I just, it's awful. The idea of not being able to, and I will respect people's time off because I know that's the right thing to do. I'm dreading it.
Yeah,
because I love what I do and just want to do it all the time.
Yeah, and I think Billy's like that. He at training, he would be the one who at the end of training would do some more kicking and would teach the kids kicking. The kids that in the end are going to take his place. He's teaching them.
Is he still playing now?
He's still playing. He's gone to Ealing as player coach.
And do you think coaching's his?
Oh, absolutely, no question. And we tried to find a way of keeping him at the club, but actually the Ealing job was better for him because his game time was going to be limited at Gloucester. And sometimes he'd been at Gloucester for 10 years or 11 years, and sometimes it's a good thing to go away and come back. So he's still around.
One of those that always stand out to me is Pep Guardiola.
Yeah.
So he did that 1 year at Brescia, I think, in Italy, because he wanted to experience a different culture and a way of working. So made that step before looping back to Barca.
And Eddie Howe did the same when he left Bournemouth.
Yes.
He spent, I think it was 3 years, shadowing clubs around Europe to learn more before being ready to come back in, and now doing a great job at Newcastle.
That's amazing. Lance, that's coming to the end of the time we have. It's been an absolute privilege, not just to have you on today, but being able to pick up the phone to you and ask you advice and guidance on different things we're doing. One of the joys of the podcast is the people who I've learned from in my career, I get to share some of their wisdom with others. So thank you so much for that.
It's a pleasure. It's great. And you've helped me a lot too. So I really appreciate it.
That's very kind. That's all for today. Thank you very much, guys.